Welcome back to Midnight Pasta. Tonight's tale may follow you into your dreams. Subscribe if you haven't already. It helps keep the lights off and the chills on. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on that day. I mean, who wouldn't? It was a strange occurrence, something I can't quite shake off, even after all these years. In 2001, I was just a fisherman in the coastal town of Eastport, Maine. Nothing exciting ever really happened there. Nothing out of the ordinary, anyway. Our daily lives were filled with the quiet routine of hauling in nets, tending to boats, and exchanging gossip over pints at the local tavern. Most of us had been born and raised on the island, and like the tide, we never strayed too far. I didn't think much of the weather that day, though it had been a bit more foggy than usual. Still, it was nothing we hadn't seen before. That's how it is on the coast of Maine. The fog can roll in thick and fast, blanketing the horizon until you can't see 5 feet in front of you. We were used to it. It was around mid-afternoon when it happened. I was out on the water, just wrapping up a small haul. The mist was thicker now, the air heavy and still. I was about a mile out from the shore when I noticed something odd. A shape in the water. At first, I thought it was just the fog playing tricks on me, but the shape didn't fade. It stayed. I cut the engine, drifting closer. My breath caught when I realized what I was looking at. A ship. Not a big one, not a cargo vessel or a cruise liner, but a small, old-fashioned schooner. The paint was peeling, and the wood seemed to sag as if the ship had been left to rot for decades. But that wasn't the strangest part. No, the strangest part was how it didn't belong there. There wasn't a single ship like that in the area, and besides that, it wasn't listed anywhere. I knew every boat in the bay, and I didn't recognize this one at all. I turned my radio on, but there was no communication from the Coast Guard or any other vessels nearby, just silence. As I approached, I could make out the faintest of sounds, creaking wood, the gentle slosh of water against the hull. And then I saw them, the crew. At first I thought they were mannequins, arranged in a macabre display, but as my boat drew closer, I realized with a chill that crawled up my spine, they were alive. Or they seemed to be. There were 6 of them, standing motionless on deck. They wore tattered sailor uniforms and their faces were pale, almost gray. Their eyes were wide open, but there was nothing in them, no sign of life. The worst part? They didn't move at all. I should have turned around right then, gone back to the safety of shore, but something held me there, an unnatural pull. It was like a voice in my head whispering, urging me to get closer. I don't know what came over me, but I found myself climbing aboard the derelict vessel, the deck groaning underfoot. The fog closed in around me, thick and damp, almost suffocating. The crew stood perfectly still, and I could see now that their eyes were unfocused, staring into nothing. Their skin, a sickly, grayish hue, seemed almost translucent in the dim light. I stood there for what felt like forever, trying to find the courage to speak to them, to shake them out of whatever trance they were in. But I couldn't. My heart raced, my palms sweaty against the worn wood of the ship's railing. The air was too still, too quiet. It was almost as though time itself had stopped. My mind screamed for me to get back to my boat, to leave this cursed place behind. But then I saw something that froze me where I stood. A small wooden plaque mounted on the ship's stern. The letters were faded, but I could just make them out. The Argent Maiden. The ship was the Argent Maiden. I knew that name. I'd heard it in stories told by the old-timers at the tavern about a ship that had disappeared off the coast in the 1800s. Some said it had been swallowed by a storm, others claimed it had simply vanished. But the ship? It was gone, vanished without a trace. But here it was, in front of me, as real as anything. The crew, still alive, but not really. The silence was broken by a single, hollow voice. One of the sailors spoke. "We've been waiting for you," it rasped. The words chilled me to my core, and as I turned to leave, my foot caught on the edge of something. A piece of metal, rusted and jagged, was embedded in the ship's deck. I could feel the coldness of it against my skin as I bent down to examine it. A name was scratched into the metal, not just any name, my name. I stumbled back, my mind racing. How could this be? The ship had been gone for years, no, decades. This couldn't be real. And then, the mist parted just enough for me to see the shore in the distance. The small town of Eastport barely visible through the fog. The crew was still watching me, their lifeless eyes following my every move. And I knew, somehow, that the ship had been waiting for me all along. I didn't stay much longer. I didn't even grab my fishing gear. I just ran, jumped into my boat and gunned the engine, heading back to shore. I should have reported it. I should have called the Coast Guard, told them what I saw. But when I reached the docks, there was nothing. No sign of the ship, no crew. Just the eerie silence of the bay and a nagging feeling in my gut. I went home that night, but I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing their faces in my mind. Those lifeless eyes, the strange, empty stares that followed me. They had been waiting for me. I was sure of it. And now, every time I step out onto the water, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. I can't help but wonder if I was meant to find that ship, if it was some kind of invitation. But I haven't gone back. Not yet. Something tells me I'm not supposed to. It's been a week since I first saw the Argent Maiden. A week, but it feels like it's been years. That ship, those faces, they haunt me. Especially the one voice that whispered to me, "We've been waiting for you." I've been trying to keep my mind occupied, pushing the thoughts of that day out, but it's impossible. Every time I close my eyes, I see them, the crew, standing motionless on deck, staring at me with their hollow eyes. The more I try to shake it, the more it feels like they're closing in, like they're waiting for me to come back. I don't know how to explain it, but I can feel it in my bones. It's not over. It wasn't just a chance encounter. I've been drawn into something much bigger than myself. I went to the tavern last night to drink away the unease, but that only made it worse. There's this old man who comes in sometimes, Amos. He's one of the last of the old-timers around here, and he's got a way of talking about things that makes your skin crawl. That night, after a few too many drinks, I asked him about the Argent Maiden. His eyes, clouded with age and too much whiskey, lit up when I mentioned it. "You've seen her, haven't you?" he asked. His voice was low, almost conspiratorial, and for the first time, he didn't sound like he was telling some exaggerated tall tale. I don't know what I saw," I mumbled, unsure of how to put it into words. "But the ship? It was real. I touched it. The crew. They're still alive, but not in a way I understand." Amos looked around quickly, as if checking for eavesdroppers, before leaning in. "The Argent Maiden," he said slowly, as if testing the words on his tongue. "It didn't disappear in a storm, son. It didn't vanish into thin air like folks say. No, it's been waiting for someone to find it." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What do you mean?" Amos took a long, slow drag from his pipe and exhaled a cloud of smoke, his gaze fixed on the ceiling as if he was seeing something far beyond the rafters. "It's cursed. The crew, they're not really alive, not anymore. They died years ago, but their souls, they're trapped. They're bound to the ship, always have been. And whoever finds the ship, whoever boards it, they're marked." I felt a chill slide down my spine, and I could see the reflection of my own unease in the old man's eyes. He was serious, and that's what scared me most. "What happens when you're marked?" I asked. Though I already had a sinking feeling, I knew the answer. "Don't you get it?" Amos said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You're tied to the ship now. They'll come for you, and when they do, they won't let go. Not until they've taken what's theirs." I didn't know what to say after that. My throat went dry, and I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of the words. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't leave it alone. The ship was still out there, and if I didn't face whatever it was, it would keep clawing at me from the shadows. I went home, barely able to sleep, haunted by the old man's warning. But when I woke up, The weight of the decision still lay heavy on my chest. I had to go back to the ship. I had to know what it was, what was really going on. I gathered my gear, nothing too fancy, just the basics. A small flashlight, some rope, a camera. If I was going to get answers, I might as well document whatever I found. The fog was thick when I left my house at dawn, the world blanketed in an eerie stillness. It was like everything around me had paused, waiting for something to happen. My truck's headlights barely cut through the fog as I drove to the dock. When I got to the water, I wasn't alone. There were other boats out there, 2 or 3, all tied up at the dock. It was unusual. Normally, I'm the only one out this early, especially with the weather like this. But these boats weren't just idly docked. They were tethered, like someone had been waiting for something. I didn't have time to think too much about it. I pushed my small boat into the water, the mist already clinging to my skin as I made my way out of the bay. My hands were shaking, but I gripped the oars tightly, trying to steady myself. The sea was unnaturally calm as I rowed further from shore, the only sound the soft slap of water against the boat. My heart thudded in my chest, and with every stroke of the oar, the fog seemed to grow thicker, pressing in around me, wrapping me in its cold embrace. After what felt like hours, I saw it again. The Argent Maiden. It was just as I remembered. A ghost ship, lost in time, its peeling wood barely visible in the murk. The crew stood on deck, frozen in place, their dead eyes following my every move. But this time, something was different. The ship wasn't still. It was moving, drifting toward me as if it had a mind of its own. The fog around it seemed to pulse, breathing with an unnatural rhythm, and the sound of creaking wood filled the air, louder now, closer. I knew in that moment I wasn't alone anymore. The ship was waiting for me. And this time, it wasn't just an encounter. This time, I could feel it. Something dark, something ancient, something that had been watching me from the moment I set foot on that cursed vessel. It wasn't the crew I had to worry about. It was the ship itself. I don't know how long I stood there staring at it, frozen in fear, but when I finally found the strength to look away, I could feel my body moving on its own accord, pushing the boat toward the ship. The fog had closed in so tightly now that I could barely see my hand in front of my face. But I could hear them, the crew. They were whispering to each other, their voices low and unintelligible. And then one of them, no, not a crew member, but something else, something darker, spoke directly to me. "We're not alone anymore," it said, its voice a raspy whisper that sent chills down my spine. "You're part of us now." I wasn't sure what happened next. My head was spinning, my heart pounding in my chest. The world around me was bending, warping. The boat moved on its own now, pulled toward the ship as if by some unseen force. And the crew? They were smiling. Not with their mouths, no. They didn't need to. They smiled with their eyes. I don't know how much time passed after I heard that voice. The fog was so thick, I couldn't even make out the shape of my own hand, let alone see the crew standing before me. But I could feel them. There was something about their presence. It wasn't just the dead weight of their eyes. It was the pull, the magnetic force of the ship itself, drawing me in. The boat drifted closer, almost in slow motion, and I couldn't make my hands obey anymore. It was as if my body had become a puppet, and whatever unseen force was steering the ship had taken control of me. I tried to scream, tried to call out for help, but my voice was caught in my throat, strangled by the thick fog and the oppressive silence that surrounded me. It wasn't just the crew, it wasn't just the ship. It was the air, too. It felt alive, vibrating with a strange energy, like something ancient and powerful was pulsing just beneath the surface. The smell of salt water mixed with something rancid. Decay. Old wood rotting beneath the pressure of time. As the boat slid closer to the Argent Maiden, I saw it more clearly. The ship's deck was slick with moisture, the wood darkened and warped from years of exposure to the sea. The crew still stood in place, but now they were moving in subtle ways. One of them shifted slightly, raising a hand, as if beckoning me closer. I couldn't look away. I don't know how it happened, whether I made the decision or if the ship made it for me, but the moment my feet touched the deck of the Argent Maiden, the fog seemed to swallow the world whole. The air around me grew cold, suffocatingly cold, and the world beyond the ship, the shoreline, the other boats, everything disappeared. I stood there, the deck creaking beneath my weight, staring at the crew. Their eyes were fixed on me, and now there was something else in those eyes. A hunger, a cold, ancient hunger, and I realized then, their eyes weren't empty. They were filled with something. Waiting. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. This wasn't just a ghost ship. This wasn't just an old, cursed vessel. No, this ship had claimed these people. It had claimed them, and it had been waiting for someone else to take their place. I took a step back, my foot scraping against the wet deck. The fog had thickened to the point where I could barely see my hand in front of my face. The only thing that was clear was the crew, and their eyes were locked on mine. One of them moved then, slowly, stiffly, like he had to force his body to work against the weight of time. It was the captain, I could tell. His uniform was frayed and torn, his face pale and drawn, his hair matted with sea salt and decay. But his eyes, they were the same as the others, hollow, waiting. He took a step forward and extended his hand, but there was no warmth in the gesture. It was as if he were offering me something, but what, I couldn't say. The air between us crackled with a strange energy. I could feel it pressing against me, pushing me back. "Join us," he rasped, his voice a strange guttural whisper. "Join us, and you'll never leave." I felt a coldness deep in my chest as the words sunk in. I wasn't leaving, not now, not ever. I was part of this ship, part of its curse. And the crew? They were not just sailors trapped in time. They were anchors. Anchors to something darker, something that clung to the ship like barnacles to the hull. I shook my head, a desperate, instinctive gesture, and tried to step back, but my feet wouldn't obey. My body was rooted to the spot. My breath was shallow now, my heartbeat thunderous in my ears. The fog pressed in harder, filling my lungs with a strange, musty scent. One of the crew members, the one closest to me, took a step forward, his hand raised, but this time there was no pleading in his eyes. There was only a void. He reached for me. I tried to pull away, but it was too late. His cold fingers brushed against my arm, and instantly a shock of ice ran through my veins. My skin burned, and I could feel something ripping inside me, something pulling me into the ship, into its heart, into its rotting soul. The world around me twisted, the deck of the ship warping, bending, as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. The crew members' eyes widened, their lips forming silent words, as if they were chanting, pulling me into the abyss. The fog had thickened so much that the ship itself seemed to dissolve, disappearing into a nightmare world that no one had ever meant to see. And then I heard something. It wasn't a voice. It was a feeling, a presence, something ancient, something deep within the ship, pulling at my mind, tearing at my soul. And the worst part? It felt familiar. The ship wasn't just calling to me. It was remembering me. It was recognizing me. I had always been meant to be here. The crew closed in around me, their hands grasping, their hollow eyes following my every movement. Their whispers filled my ears, growing louder and louder, like a chant rising to a crescendo. "We've been waiting," they murmured in unison. "We've been waiting for you." And I knew, at that moment, that it wasn't just the crew that was alive, it was the ship itself. The Argent Maiden had a life of its own. It was waiting for the next soul to claim. And that soul was mine. It's difficult to describe what happened next. I've tried over and over again to make sense of it, to put the pieces together, but the more I try, the less coherent it all becomes. My mind keeps shifting back to that moment when the crew surrounded me, their cold hands closing in, when the whispers reached a fever pitch. I could still feel the burn of their touch, their icy fingers pressing into my skin like something that had never been meant to exist in this world. The ship had come alive beneath me, its dark wood groaning, its sails rustling with a sound that was too human, too alive. For a split second, I felt the weight of all those souls trapped on board, the ones who had come before me, the ones who had never left. They were pulling me in, dragging me into the heart of the ship where its soul, its darkness, resided. I could feel it, creeping along my spine, sinking into my chest, making my breath hitch with the coldness of it. I tried to fight it. I tried to claw my way out, to break free of their grasp, but the more I struggled, the tighter they held on. Their grip was suffocating, their presence all-consuming. One of the crew members, an older man, his face nearly indistinguishable from the decay of the ship, leaned in close. His breath was rank, like the smell of salt and rot. He smiled, but there was no warmth in his expression, no trace of humanity, just the hollow emptiness of a soul long lost. "You'll join us," he rasped, his voice like the creak of old wood. "You'll never leave. We are the ship, and the ship is us." The words made my head spin, my mind spinning in circles, caught between the horrors I was experiencing and the growing realization that I was becoming part of it all. I wasn't just on the ship anymore. I wasn't just trapped. I was becoming a part of the curse. I could feel it in the marrow of my bones, in the pulse of my blood. I was bound to this place, to this ship, to the crew. And worst of all, I could feel the darkness inside me awakening. It wasn't just the ship's pull. It was me. The ship was waking up inside me. It was calling me home, calling me to become like them. The fog grew thicker, heavier, until it felt as though the world itself was being suffocated under the weight of the ship's curse. I could no longer see anything beyond the deck, beyond the faces of the crew that circled around me. But I didn't need to see. I could feel their eyes, cold and empty, boring into me. Then, as if on cue, the ship began to move again, slowly, sluggishly, like it was waking from a long, long sleep. The creaking of the timbers filled the air, punctuated by the sound of ropes being pulled tight and the sails unfurling with an eerie grace. It was as if the ship was no longer a ghost. It was becoming real, becoming solid, and I, along with it, was becoming part of that reality. And that was when I understood. The Argent Maiden wasn't just a ship. It wasn't just an old cursed relic of the sea. It was a prison, yes, but it was more than that. It was a thing that could bend time, that could steal souls, that could drag the living into its cursed embrace. I was no longer just a person on a ship. I was part of the ship, part of its curse, part of its soul. The crew had been waiting for me to understand that. They had been waiting for me to realize that I was now bound to them, that there was no escaping. Not anymore. And as the ship began to move out into the open water, I felt the final shift. The fog seemed to lift, and the world beyond the ship disappeared. The sea stretched out before me, empty and endless. And in that emptiness, I could feel the ship's hunger. It was waiting for more. I tried to scream. I tried to fight it, to push back against the inevitability of it. But I was silenced. My voice was swallowed by the roaring silence that surrounded me. And then, from somewhere deep within the bowels of the Argent Maiden, I heard the whisper again. "We've been waiting for you." And I knew, with terrifying certainty, that I would never leave. The fog began to settle again, but this time, it wasn't just the mist that clung to me. It was the ship's soul, and I could feel it now, thrumming through my veins, deep in my chest, like a second heartbeat. It was alive, and it was mine. And as the ship sailed further into the dark waters, with the crew surrounding me, I realized I would never escape. No one would. Not ever. Because the Argent Maiden would always be waiting. That wraps up tonight's pasta. If your lights flicker, don't blame the wiring until the next shadow creeps in. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It helps more than you know. And if you liked the story, don't forget to hit the like button. In the comments below, share your own horror experience. I'll be reading after midnight. Good night. See you again tomorrow.